At 11 a.m. 2 years ago today, the nation and hundreds of millions of people across the world turned on their televisions to watch the final goodbye to the woman who gave them everything, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's state funeral, which took place in the majestic Westminster Abbey, fittingly paid tribute to her extraordinary reign. The Queen's coffin had been lying in state since the evening of Wednesday, September 14. At 6:30 a.m. on the morning of Monday, September 19, after hundreds of thousands of people had queued across London to pay their respects, the lying in state came to an end, and the funeral proceedings began. The service was attended by nearly every notable world leader from U.S. President Joe Biden to French President Emmanuel Macron. There, too, were the kings and queens of Europe's royal houses, as well as those from further afield. Also in the congregation were holders of the George Cross and the Victoria Cross in line with the late Queen's wishes. Almost 200 people who were recognized in the Queen's birthday honors earlier in 2022 attended too. At the end of the service, the last post was played and 2 minutes silence was observed, not only in the Abbey but throughout the United Kingdom. Her Majesty's coffin was borne to Wellington Arch via the Mall on the state gun carriage. The carriage, made in 1896, was first used at Queen Victoria's state funeral in 1901, and it has been used for that of every monarch since, including Edward VII, George V, and George VI. The body of the only prime minister to have received a state funeral, Sir Winston Churchill, in 1965, was also carried on the state gun carriage. The carriage was originally manned by the army. However, at Queen Victoria's funeral, some of the horses started panicking and nearby sailors were ordered to take over. They've been in charge ever since, and won't relinquish the honor. Nearly 100 sailors pulled the carriage, with a further 40 behind acting as breakers. They also had 4 officers alongside. That year, for the first time in history, female sailors were part of the gun crew. The king and members of the royal family followed the Queen's coffin in the procession. The procession included detachments from the armed forces of the Commonwealth as well as detachments of the British Armed Forces who held a special relationship with the Queen. The King's Guard gave a salute as the coffin passed the Queen Victoria Memorial at the end of the Mall. Once the Queen's body reached Wellington Arch, it was placed in the state hearse. The national anthem was played as the hearse began its journey to St. George's Chapel for the committal service. When the coffin reached Windsor, the state hearse joined a procession which traveled via the famous Long Walk to St. George's Chapel. Members of the royal family joined the procession in the quadrangle at Windsor Castle. Minute guns were fired on the east lawn at Windsor Castle by the King's Troop, Royal Horse Artillery, and the Sebastopol bell tolled throughout the procession. Her Majesty's fell pony, Emma, and her gorgeous Nuke and Sandy were movingly present as the procession passed by. It then halted at the bottom of the west steps of St. George's Chapel, where a guard of honor was mounted. The Queen's coffin was borne in procession into the chapel. The committal service began at 4 p.m., and alongside His Majesty and members of the royal family, the congregation was made up of past and present members of the Queen's household. The Bible reading given by the Dean of Windsor, Revelation 21, verses 1 to 7, was the same passage read at the funerals of the Queen's grandparents, King George V in 1936 and Queen Mary in 1953, and Her Majesty's father, King George VI, in 1952. The service was conducted by the Dean of Windsor, with prayers said by the Rector of Sandringham, the Minister of Crathie Kirk, and the Chaplain of Windsor Great Park. The choir of St. George's Chapel sang during the service. Prior to the final hymn, the imperial state crown, the orb, and the scepter were removed from the Queen's coffin and placed on the altar. The King then placed the Queen's company camp color of the Grenadier Guards on Her Majesty's coffin. At the same time, the Lord Chamberlain broke his wand of office and placed it on the coffin. As the Queen's coffin was lowered into the royal vault, the sovereign's piper played a lament and Archbishop of Canterbury pronounced the blessing. The national anthem was sung at the conclusion of the service. A private burial took place in the King George VI Memorial Chapel later that evening, conducted by the Dean of Windsor. The Queen was buried together with the Duke of Edinburgh, her parents, and her sister, Princess Margaret. So ended one of the saddest days in royal and British history. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more news updates. Hit subscribe for the latest news.